Good evening. It is time for today's Tax Talk. I'm your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. I am not a producer. I am a producer because I'm producing this show. But I am producing the show, so thanks so much for joining us. It is Monday, February 27th, the year of our Lord 2023. And actually, we're late. Why? How could we be late? Well, and I even forgot about it. Now, nobody knows more about this stuff than me, I would think. And I even got past me. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The IRS's missed deadline. Won't you join us? So let's remember when this passed for the $80 billion to the IRS. And when it passed, without a single Republican vote, Janet Yellen ordered that in 6 months' time, the IRS was to produce a report, a strategic plan. How are you going to spend that $80 billion bucks? And the IRS says, well, we'll have to review it and get back to you. And she said, you good. You have 6 months to do so. Now, there's also a deadline approaching when they have to come up with a plan on how is the IRS going to prepare taxes for people for free. And so that also is coming up, but I suspect I'll miss that deadline too. But anyway, let's go to the story right away, and we'll figure this out because there's a couple of good stories about it. And again, this was the deadline was February 17th. I read every story I can about the IRS. I didn't see a story until today about this. I think there was one a couple of days ago. Might have been a day that I missed. And I think it was 5 days ago. That would have made it Thursday. But anyway, nobody's making a big deal about it. You know, oh, don't worry, they'll spend that $80 billion. And the answer is we all know that they're going to spend the $80 billion. It's now we want to know on what. So let's go to the story. Here's the story. Negligent IRS gets $80 billion but misses deadline to account for the money. What happens when that's what this guy does. So let's talk about this. When even progressives complain about the arrogance and incompetence of the IRS, it's clear the agency needs a house cleaning. Then again, if Congress did its job, the IRS would have less leeway to screw up. When congressional Democrats rolled over unanimous Republican opposition last year to provide the IRS with an additional $80 billion, much of which was to hire 87,000 new staffers, the agency itself was left significant leeway to decide exactly how to spend the money. This was a dereliction of duty by the Democratic Congress, which not only targeted the money far more heavily towards enforcement than to customer service, but even within those parameters, left the IRS with too much wiggle room. On August 17th, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen directed the agency to provide, within 6 months, an operational plan detailing how these resources will be deployed over the course of the next decade. The plan, she said, must include metrics for areas of focus and targets over the course of the coming years. Before Congress even approved the new money, then Commissioner of the IRS, Charles Rettig, had said, we don't plan to wait 6 months to implement what Congress provides to us. We will be ready. Of course, the IRS missed the February 17th deadline. So what is it today, the 17th? That's 10 days ago. And again, I hadn't really heard anything. While conservative outrage is valuable and should not be taken for granted, it also is not unexpected. Progressives, on the other hand, tend to be the IRS boosters, which is why they pushed the $80 billion in the first place. Agreed. So when a leading progressive voice condemns the agency, that means the agency really has messed up. Yet last week, Howard Gleckman of the Urban Institute wrote a column excoriating the IRS's failure. The Urban Institute is a liberal think tank, historically rated to the left of the NAACP, founded by Lyndon Johnson's administration, and financed both through big government grants and a slew of progressive foundations. All I know, wrote Gleckman, is if somebody promised me $80 billion or even $80,000 and all I had to do was describe by February 17th how I'd spend it, I'd pretty much sure that to make that deadline. Instead, the IRS press officer blithely says the agency expects to deliver the plan to Secretary Yellen in the coming weeks, whatever that means. If the civil service laws weren't so weighted against real discipline for bureaucratic failures, and if liberal administrations such as Joe Biden's weren't blasé about holding federal workers to account, numerous IRS employees would lose their jobs over this administrative lassitude. Or, better yet, Congress would pass another law, this time clawing back some of the extravagant $80 billion and explicitly redirecting most of the rest of it to the help desk for honest taxpayers who can't even get an agent to pick up the phone. That's actually true. When Congress gives $80 billion in additional money to an outfit already famous for near criminal negligence and abusiveness, it should be no surprise that the outfit will be negligent about deadlines as well. The question is, will Yellen do anything about the IRS's defiance? Does she even care? The answer is no, she doesn't care. She knew it was coming. All along she knew it was coming. You think she just found out on February 17th that they weren't going to make the deadline? I'm sure don't worry about it. And this goes to the top, right? When the top doesn't really pressure you to meet a deadline, well, you don't meet the deadline. There is really no deadline, is there? This is another story from Forbes. This one was written, as I was saying, this was February 22nd, and that's why I said 5 days ago. So, and this was the only story, only other story I found. So 5 days would be Sunday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday. Was I here on Wednesday? I don't know. IRS misses its deadline for completing a plan to spend $80 billion in new money. Howard Gleckman, this is what he said. I covered tax budgets and retirement policy from Washington. So but I got to say, this one is not as scathing as the other one. It's more understanding than I would be. Let's put it that way. Yes, I've known for months that my taxes are due by April 18th, but I'm changing tax preparers and I'm really busy at work. And there was a pandemic and my return is really complicated. That sounds a bit like the IRS's recent admission that it missed the February deadline to complete a business plan for spending the $80 billion in new funding it got from Congress last year. Last August, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen directed the IRS to develop a plan by February 17th. But 6 months later, on February 16th, the IRS said it wasn't ready. Instead, it released a statement that said, in part, it expects to deliver the plan to the Secretary in the coming weeks. One top Treasury official said the plan would be complete this spring. President Biden's nominee for IRS Commissioner, Daniel Werfel, assured the Senate Finance Committee at his confirmation hearing that he would share the report with Congress and the public whenever it gets complete. Yet, neither the IRS nor Treasury has said how. And in fairness, the IRS already is spending some of the cash. In August, Yellen authorized the near-term use of funds to improve services for the 2023 filing season. That allowed the IRS to hire 5,000 new telephone assisters and others. It was a start, but the agency needs an overall plan for the new dollars. There are plenty of reasons for the delay. The commissioner at the time Yellen set the deadline, Charles Rettig, left when his term expired in November, and the Biden administration took its time nominating Werfel as his replacement. And the finance panel didn't hold the confirmation hearing for Werfel until February 15th, and the full Senate has not yet approved him. And yes, Werfel should have something to say about the plan he will be responsible for administering, at least in its first years. Still, the spending plan must be the most significant document the IRS will produce for the remainder of the Biden administration. It will, in large measure, establish the agency's credibility with Congress and the public as it prepares to spend $80 billion over the next decade, and a not insubstantial sum, even in the world of federal budgets. See, he's a little bit more understanding than I am about it. Sure, the IRS and Treasury want to be certain that they get it right. Do you really believe that they're going to get it right? That all of this money is only going to be spent in the most efficient, effective way possible? Do you really believe that? I don't think anybody believes that. Sure, the IRS and Treasury want to be certain that they get it right, but the longer delay, the slower the implementation, and the more time for urban myths to linger. Urban myths like, oh, they're not going to only target 400,000 or more people, including the baseless claim that the agency will use its funds to hire 87,000 revenue agents. First, it's not a baseless claim. It was the Treasury's only numbers. It was the Treasury that came out with that number, and the Democratic administration. So it's not a baseless claim. Keep in mind, too, that Treasury has been deeply involved in drafting the document since last summer. Well, they're busy at it. They're too busy at it to really complete it. Yellen designated her most senior aide. Oh, well, that says something. Deputy Secretary Wally, whatever his name is, to work with IRS to develop specific initiatives and timelines. It is not as if Yellen will be handed some surprise set of recommendations her staff never has seen before, but maybe the American people will. Maybe we're interested in it. Besides, the IRS isn't writing this document on stone. Whatever the initial plan is, it almost surely will be revised as the agency's needs change. The priority now is to get out something that will help assure Congress and the public that the agency has a credible plan for spending this substantial new dollars and to get started on the needed changes. The delay is especially surprising since the agency has known for years that new money could be coming. Presidential candidate Joe Biden proposed more funding for the IRS back in 2020, and that money was included in Biden's first budget of May 2021. The IRS could have begun to develop a strategic plan for improving enforcement, taxpayer service, information technology, and all the rest as soon as Biden got elected. Indeed, if the IRS were a business, it would have developed a plan even before asking for funding. It only makes sense for an organization to first decide what it needs to do before figuring out those initiatives would cost. That's not the way government works. And I'm going to tell you right now, what does the IRS need now? More. But we want more. But this is Washington, and the IRS certainly is not business. Still, the agency needs are hardly a state secret. One could, for instance, read the reports of the Congress by agency's own Taxpayer Advocate Service, a totally independent agency, or even its annual data book to learn what gaps need to be filled, a book that they write, and the gaps are always are forever growing whenever they need to make a point and ask for more money, which is what they always do. All I know is if somebody promised me $80 billion or even 80,000, and all I had to do was describe by February 17th how I'd spend it, I'm pretty much sure to make that deadline. Given the IRS's or maybe Treasury's delay, it seems only fair for the agency to waive those penalties and interest if I miss my April 18th filing deadline this spring. I'm looking forward to it. Well, don't hold your breath, right? Because that ain't going to happen. That's not the way government works. Their budget, their deadline doesn't mean anything. You miss a deadline, there is no ifs, ands, buts about it. You're going to pay. There's a penalty. And we can't make exceptions. You can ask for an abatement, but you need a reasonable cause. What's the reasonable cause here? A friend came in from out of town. The light was in my eyes. It wasn't my fault, as John Belushi said in the Blues Brothers. Right. So I think it is their fault. And I think they don't really care. They have the money. They don't want to tell us how they're going to spend it because it's mostly for enforcement. And they keep denying that that's the fact, but it is the fact. And so that's where the money's going to go, for enforcement. So anyway, thanks so much for joining us here today. I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. We need your help to get this information out. And again, did you know that they missed the deadline? I bet you didn't. Now you know. Maybe we should hold their feet to the fire, right? Maybe they should be held to the same standards that you and I are held to, that they hold us to. There's always a double standard, isn't there? So please like and subscribe. And remember, if you have an IRS problem, if you don't know what to do when you owe the IRS money or you have unfiled tax returns, you're caught. You don't know what to do. First thing you should do, get a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. Go to freeirsbook.com. That's freeirsbook.com. Get your free copy. I will pay for the publishing. I will ask you to pay for the shipping and handling. It's about $10. So it's under $10. So go to freeirsbook.com. That's freeirsbook.com. Get your free copy. So thanks so much for joining us here today. We shall return tomorrow. It is Crypto Tuesday. You won't want to miss it. There's lots of going on in the crypto world. And in the meantime, God bless you. And we are now out.